So here's my question for you. Can a good CEO also be a really good parent? I'm not really sure, because I think they can involve very different skill sets. I spent the first 20 years of my career in corporate education, primarily as the CEO of a leadership development business. At our peak, we had about 600 professionals in 20 countries, and we served over half of the Fortune 500. That required me to spend a lot of time in front of customers and a lot of time on a plane. Fortunately, my strategy for surviving childhood, and not my childhood, but my children's childhood, was to also spend a lot of time on a plane. That strategy worked for me for a while, until one night, 2008, I came home to family dinner, and it was my wife, my 3 children, and as we sit down, my 9-year-old, Jackson, looks up to me and says, "Dad, why are you here?" And man, did that hit home. I looked over at my wife, gave me one of those looks with the eyebrow raised that only a wife can give. And I realized that night I needed to make some changes. By the end of that year, I had merged our business with one of our largest competitors. I'd stepped out of the CEO role. I'd stepped onto the board. I'd promised my family I would not do any more business travel. And I committed that I wanted to be really involved in my kids' life, and in particular in their education. Well, I thought I knew a little bit about leadership and what it took to be successful in life. My whole passion in life have been about how do you unlock human potential? What are the attributes that really make people come alive and be successful, not just at work, but in their whole life? And so as a student of this, I had my list. My list had a lot of data behind it. And I went around to a bunch of schools in our county where we live, and I said, look, here's my list. Leadership, self-awareness, adaptability, emotional intelligence, collaboration, systems thinking. Could you show me your curriculum and where you teach the kids all these skills? And as you imagine, I got kind of blank looks back. School after school, I would ask this question. At some point, I thought, my goodness, I'm going to have to create my own school for my own kids just to teach them all these things that I want them to learn. Well, I'll tell you what I did encounter. I didn't find a school that had that curriculum, but I found an increasing level of anxiety at every school I went to. And as I talked to the parents, tell me about your community, and I talked to the teachers, tell me about your classroom, and I talked to the kids, what's it like to go to school here? What I found was an enormous amount of anxiety, and it was getting worse. This is my family. I'm the one in the middle. And this is a study conducted by the Pew Research Group, published earlier this year. They interviewed thousands of teenagers all across the country and asked them, what are you most concerned about in your life? Of all the things that give you concern about keeping you from being successful, what bothers you the most? 70% of teenagers in this country say that their number one concern is anxiety. And it's a major concern. If you include it's a minor concern as well, it's 96% of all teenagers in the country feel this way. Doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your economic level, right? This is way ahead of bullying, drug addiction, drinking, poverty, teenage pregnancy, and gangs. And unfortunately, this is increasing. It's not going down. In fact, it continues into college. The American Association of College Counseling Centers published this report last year. Over the last 10 years, the level of anxiety-related health concerns in colleges across the country has increased 40%. Today, over half, 50% of all health-related issues on colleges' campuses are related to anxiety, right? United States, 40 million adults are diagnosed clinically with general anxiety disorder. It's a medical condition. That's 1 in 5 adults today suffers from some level of anxiety, right? So my pursuit of how do I help my kids shifted a little bit from how do I prepare them to be CEOs to how do I reduce their anxiety and improve their well-being. Fortunately, there's also a lot of data on how do you reduce anxiety. The theories range. Some people say anxiety is a result of accelerating technology, too much social media, concern about politics, concern about the environment, more people living alone at home, fewer religious institutions, greater economic disparity, and maybe as I'm running through this list, you're finding your own anxiety increase a little bit. So I apologize for that. But what I was really interested in was, well, are those root causes or are those symptoms? And clearly there are environmental conditions in the world that are complicated, and as a society, they're getting more complex. Yet I was most fascinated by a study that was published by a woman named Jean Twenge. She was a professor at San Diego State University, and she did a meta-analysis in 2010 where she looked at all of these different conditions and criteria and implications, and across hundreds of studies, she tried to determine what's the root cause that's driving this anxiety. We're effectively making ourselves crazy, and it's affecting our children and their health. And here's what she discovered. The result of her meta-analysis was that culturally, our values are shifting. All of the results pointed to cultural shifts towards extrinsic goals, such as materialism and status, and away from intrinsic goals, such as purpose, community, connection. Statistically, over the last 30 or 40 years, our value set is moving in the wrong direction, in my opinion. It's decreasing our human well-being, and it's increasing anxiety and depression. Okay, so as a parent, as a leader, in this age of anxiety, what can we do? Well, I've got 3 suggestions for you, and I'll tell you a short story about each one. My first story, there's a middle school in San Francisco that I'm familiar with that conducted a study last year where they invited the middle school students to spend 6 weeks exploring the question of social media and how does it affect their own health. And after 6 weeks of interviewing business people and parents and tracking their own social media usage, we went to the UCSF neuroscience lab to look at the neurological effect on the brain of social media. We met with the co-founder of Twitter, Evan Williams, and at the end they brought all the parents into the gymnasium when we packed the house, and the kids stood up and they presented their findings and their top 10 list of guidelines back to parents of how we could all improve our health by the way we interact with social media. The number one thing on the list of recommendations by the students back to the parents was parental modeling. It was about this time that a couple of the dads in the room looked up from their phone and said, "What?" And basically what the kids indicated was, look, we're watching you. We're watching you drive, we're watching you at the dinner table, we're watching you interact at home at night on the sofa. We're watching you. If you want us to do this, then it starts with you, right? So this idea of modeling became prevalent in our thinking about the role that we as adults play. There's a researcher at the University of British Columbia named Kim Schoenert-Reichel who took this one step further. She's been fascinated with the effect that adults have on students, and so she conducted a study with 17 elementary school teachers and 406 students over several weeks, where she had them spit into test tubes at the beginning of each day. And if you're an elementary school student, this is already a fun experiment for you, right? But what she was looking for was she was actually measuring the cortisol levels in the blood and relating those to the levels of stress and anxiety physiologically in the body of these people. And what she found, statistically significant amounts, was that as the adults' anxiety and stress went up, so did the kids. And as the adults took their stress and anxiety down, it decreased in the kids as well. So she was demonstrating that there is a direct causal physiological relationship between the adult and the stress in the adult and the way it's transmitted to the students. So there's a psychological effect of observing the parents. There's a physiological effect of being connected in relationship to an adult. And finally, there's a cognitive effect. The human brain processes about 11 bits of information 40 bits of information every second consciously. So consciously, if you're giving somebody instruction, they can hold about 40 bits of information. If you have a teenager, this may sound like a stretch. But statistically, it's about 40 bits of information. Subconsciously, however, we process 11 million bits of information every second. So 40 to 11 million. Because basically the focused, conscious, rational mind could only handle about 40 bits, but intuitively, we're picking up everything. Emotions, signals, body language, tone, feelings, temperature, you're taking it all in. So the bottom line is this. First and foremost, you are a model. As a leader and as a parent, if you want to help improve the anxiety and well-being of your students or your kids, you're a model. This is my son Jackson when he was about 4. We're getting dressed for my sister Katie's wedding. And look at his look on my face as he's watching me tie my tie. Right? This is the effect that you have on your kids. If you want to reduce their anxiety, you got to take care of yourself first. Okay, my second story. When we were running our leadership business, we had a client that called, big multinational Fortune 100 organization, and they had an executive that they'd recently promoted up into the CEO job. And before promotion, this executive was very popular, well-loved, amiable, high interpersonal skills. Yet since being promoted, there'd been an enormous amount of stress in the organization. People said he had changed. He was no longer connecting with them. He was brusque. They felt intimidated. There was a lot of stress in the organization. So we brought in an executive coach to try and figure out what was going on. And after a couple weeks of observation, the coach had made her recommendation back to the CEO and said, look, I've found 3 things that you need to be aware of. And the CEO now was a big man. He was tall, commanding presence. And she said to him, first off, you need to understand that since taking over the job, the stress level of the CEO has reduced how much interpersonal time you're making with people. You're not connecting as much. You're jumping straight to the to-do list, and people don't feel as close to you, number 1. Number 2, they're now projecting a different level of authority onto you. They're amplifying everything you're doing. You're now in a big position of power. You can hire and fire anybody in the company. And so you need to be aware that they're watching your body language, your tone, whether you smile or not, how you walk down the hall. You're effectively magnified in their eyes, and it's having an effect. And third, which was a little funny, about the time he became the CEO, he also started using reading glasses. And they said, now, what people say is that you look over your reading glasses and you look down at them, and they feel like you have this like foreboding bearing, this presence, and they can't see you smile anymore. So our recommendation is you need to get some contacts. And if you run a consulting firm, you love those stories. So he did it, and within a matter of weeks, everything was back to normal. So imagine you're a child and you're coming into your home from school, and imagine you've got some stress already at that age. You've got some homework. Maybe you've got a big game coming up. A friend did or didn't say the right thing to you that day. And imagine the parents start in right away with that CEO presence. You're big, you're strong, you have authority, and you start going through the checklist. How was your day? Did you turn in your homework? Did you get that score back on the chemistry test? Did you forget to sign up for the field trip? How much lunch did you eat? Did you remember you've got a party on Saturday night, we need to go get a present for the kid? Instantly, the kid's on his heels, just like the employees in that example with the CEO, right? So there's a solution to this, which is you have to learn to change gears. If you're going to go from the CEO mode into a more compassionate presence or to a parenting mode, if you're lucky, you have somebody like this in your life. This is my daughter, Layla. This is when she was also about 4. And she let me know what she was thinking all the time. There was no filter. There still isn't. She's 13 now. And the gift of Layla was, it was complete transparency. You know how she feels every second of the day, and this is the look she'll give you when she's not happy, right? So this was a gift to me, because I realized when I was in my CEO mode, this is what I was getting back. And what happens is we're unintentionally encoding these kids, right? We don't mean to be. We have the best intentions. But we're taking our CEO skills right back into the family and with the kids, and what they're picking up is, oh wait, what's important is my grades, my homework, did I score a goal, what did I accomplish this week, how busy am I, what am I going to do at camp? It's a to-do list, so I got to get busy. There's a lot of stuff I got to do. We don't mean to be doing this. We're trying to connect with our kids. But the way that we're connecting, they're interpreting this as stuff outside of them that they now have to perform. Right? We're causing the anxiety of the focus on external rewards just in the way that we're engaging with them. Because we're under stress, we're in go-go mode, and that's the way we're choosing to interact. So you have to change your way of being. You have to change your language with them. You need to decompress before you come in the house, take the phone, turn it off, put it in the nightstand, be present, and see the child in front of you, right? Your message to them is, I love you and I accept you exactly as you are. So let's talk differently to each other. What did you enjoy about school today? What made you laugh? Tell me a funny story about a friend. Connect with them in a different way where you're not unintentionally creating a subconscious imprint on them that they now have to perform at a different level to get your approval, because that's what you want to talk about and they want to engage with you. So they realize, well, all this stuff going on inside of me, that doesn't seem to be of interest. Let me spend my time focusing on all these things outside of me. Okay, last story. About 10 years ago, we were on a family vacation down on a beach somewhere, and my wife and I were sitting there at the table, and my 3 children, and they were fighting. And my kids don't fight all the time. It's mainly just when they're together. In this case, my wife and I looked up, and there was another family sitting across from us, and they had older kids. They were in their late teens, and they were really enjoying themselves. They were laughing and smiling and talking, and my wife and I had one of those exchanges that I could describe as maybe functional family envy, just for a moment. And we actually went up and we talked to the other parents. We said, listen, we're just admiring, you got a beautiful thing going on here. How did you do this? And their advice to us was, be around and watch for the opening. Well, in my current situation with my kids fighting, for me, watch for the opening was watch for the opening to make a break for the bar. But that isn't what they meant. What they went on to describe was, as the kids matured from being children into being teens and then young adults, they shifted their parenting style. And instead of coming in with their agenda for the kids, they waited for the kids to open to them. And so you had to be around because you didn't know when that was going to happen. You had to be waiting and listening and tuned in. And then when the kids opened up, you could engage. This reminded me of our leadership training. Leadership and mentoring and coaching are 2 very different things. As leaders, we're taught to achieve the goal. Here's how we achieve the goal. We have people and resources and budgets and deadlines, and my job is to help everybody achieve that goal. Now, I care about you, and I want you to be successful, and I want to develop you, but I'm not your parent. I'm here to help all of us be successful towards the goal. That's very different from being a coach or a mentor. And what these parents were describing was the shift from being the boss or the leader to being the coach or the mentor. As a mentor, the person I'm mentoring has an agenda. They're coming to me. I don't have an agenda for them. They're asking for me for guidance and support. So I have to really dial into them. What would serve them? What do they want? How can I ask them good questions to have them see what they're struggling with differently? The key skill of a mentor or a coach is inquiry. It's not leading or giving advice or giving direction or setting the strategic goal. It's asking really thoughtful, open questions. So this is my 3rd son, my 3rd child, my 2nd son, Jafer. In this case, he was about 13. He was a pitcher, and I'm hoping that this was me as a mentor asking him really good questions about the batting order and his pitch count and his plan for the next inning. I'm positive I wasn't giving him advice and telling him exactly what he needed to be doing. I would never have done that. Parker Palmer, one of my favorite spiritual educators, said that this is about shifting from being reactive and judgmental, where you have an agenda and opinion, to wonder and inquiry. So my 3rd point of advice for you, model, mirror, and mentor. And in mentoring, you're there for them. How can I help you develop? I don't have an agenda. I'm here for you, and I want you to be successful. So, who you are is more important than what you teach. Embody it, be present, mirror back who they are to them, let them know that they are enough. Focus on developing their inner sense of self, their inner connection, how they feel, who they think they are, what they like. Focus on what's inside of them, not what's outside of them. Because whatever you're teaching, they're only getting a fraction of that. They're picking up what you're doing infinitely more. And the way you're engaging with them means a lot more to them than what you think the wisdom you think you're sharing. So, my personal story, I spent 4 years on that board, and then we sold it to a public company. If I had had Tugboat, I might have been able to navigate both career and family at the same time, but at that age and at that time I wasn't. But what I did do is I did commit the second half of my career to being a CEO and improving the well-being of kids. And not just my own kids, but the kids at every grade, for every year, at the school that I did end up starting. Thank you.